Hey, everybody, welcome back to the last, not the last session, but the last cluster of sessions before the closing keynote and the raffle. My name is John Mayer. I'm the Executive Director of Cali. Thank you for coming back. We have three excellent presentations, and the first of them is, oops, I've clicked off the wrong one. Here we are, using technology to cultivate student voices in legal education pedagogy, by Jamie Abrams of the University of Louisville. So Jamie, take it away.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to be here. This is my first ever CALIcon, and I have learned so much, and it's just a great opportunity to connect with folks across the country. So my presentation is about using voice-based tools within a traditional legal education pedagogy. And so in my time together, I'm going to talk about some of the long-standing critiques of our existing pedagogies, particularly really our use of the Socratic method as a dominant teaching technique. I'm going to talk a little bit about what kinds of voice-based tools are out there and how they might fit into the existing courses that we teach, and then how those tools might respond to some of the existing critiques of current legal education teaching techniques. In my time, I have used particularly Flipgrid and VoiceThread. So those are the products that I'm talking about, but I would love for folks in the chat, if there's another voice-based or video-based tool that you have used. There are many other competitors out there, and I don't mean to promote one or another, but if there's other ones that you like, that you've tried, that your students really engaged with, I invite you to throw those out there so people can connect and understand the kinds of tools we're talking about here. But these are the two I'm drawing on in my experience. So just to kind of set the frame in case you've not seen these tools before, this is this is a picture, and it's not even that specific, it's not very super clear what it is, but this is my homepage on a Flipgrid site. So Flipgrid is one tool that is accessible for voice and video-based assignments. You can see here I have a number of different classes, from family law to torts, to rules and reasoning, a sort of advanced legal analysis course. And in those, I have multiple different assignments. So if you were a student, you would come in and see the different topics that I've queued up for my students. So that's one of our tools. At first glance, if you were attending and you've never seen Flipgrid, you might just go right now and take a quick peek at their website. At first glance, it's a little juvenile looking, but it is easily remedied with a quick picture to add some panache to your site. And on it, students can record video postings and then respond to each other's video postings. So I like to think of Flipgrid as sort of like a video discussion board, because they can engage together. Second, this is VoiceThread, and you can see already the difference that Flipgrid is a little more inviting, yet juvenile, but VoiceThread is a little less inviting, but it's a little more sophisticated in what it can do, in my opinion. So I use Flipgrid for more statutory interpretation assignments or client counseling assignments, where I want them to be looking at a rule or engaging with a rule much more directly. And so you can see here I have various assignments on child support enforcement and alimony, and I'll talk about those as we go. But so why these types of tools? Well, particularly I've been drawn to these tools, particularly in response to critiques of how the Socratic method engages with students and how it helps students develop or not develop their voice as a future legal professional. So the Socratic method is one student at a time. The best engagement you could hope for would be one student participating with others sort of on deck waiting or wondering if they're on call next. The Socratic method, in most performances of it, positions the professor as the center of the class instead of positioning a client as the center of the class or the students as the center of the class. It's most often led entirely by the directors or the professor sort of directing the students to where the professor wants them to go. And because of that, it's much more hierarchical than other types of teaching techniques. It's often described as the sage on the stage, where the professor sort of holds the power and holds the knowledge. And in that sense, it can be quite disempowering for students. And it can really skew the client, and it can skew the role of lawyering skills that are driving the cases that we're discussing. The harms of the Socratic method or the effects of the Socratic method are well documented in a robust collection of scholarship, highlighting the experiences particularly of students of color, women students, non-traditional students who find the Socratic method particularly marginalizing or particularly dissonant to their personality type or to their style of engagement and participation. I think in some implementations of it, it can contribute to the malaise of many of our law students and feel pretty disempowering and disengaging. There's a big dynamic of fear, and it's certainly disconnected from the study of law and the practice of law. It doesn't really represent any meaningful scenario of what our students will do when they get into practice. And so one thing that has really drawn me to these voice-based tools is a realization that as faculty, we are doing quite little, actually, even the most well-intentioned faculty, to manage voices in our classroom. Many of us manage through techniques like on-call, where a group of people might know they're on call, or volunteers. And in that sense, we might be really helping our own classrooms by making sure the quality of participation is strong, but it's not really adding to the inclusivity of the voices we hear in the classroom or the empowerment of the students as they speak. Many professors do Socratic dialogue randomly, which really embeds that dynamic of fear, but then keeps the students engaged because of it, anticipating they might be on call for the next case. But there's documented studies of differences in the quantity of participation. We see particularly that white students and male students are far more likely to be comfortable with this method of teaching and more likely to engage more often. And I was really struck in COVID teaching, or have been really struck in COVID teaching, that that's even true in Zoom. So I do my on-calls with small firms. So I'll get 6 or 8 students up and we'll talk about a case, and then the next firm will come up. And even then, I've noticed what I've called sort of Zoom bombing, where a strong, confident, often white and male student will just burst their camera on with a question or with a contribution, even when I've subdivided us further. So differences in quantity of participation, the sort of gunner vibe, so to speak. And there are numerous studies, beginning with Lonnie Guinier's contributions in Becoming Gentlemen, capturing the effects of this. But as students become disengaged or disconnected from our classrooms, that can affect their overall outcome and their trajectory in law school overall. So numerous studies in legal education have tried to address this, that we need to be preparing students better for the profession, instilling in them the skills and the values that it takes to thrive in the profession. The recent ABA standards have pushed us toward a more formative assessment and measuring outcomes, making sure that our students are not just these passive recipients of our instruction, but they're actually achieving the learning outcomes that we've set for our courses and our programs. And I think perhaps most interestingly, in just recently, last fall, I believe, the Building a Better Bar report was published, really capturing this disconnect between what practitioners want and know that they need to be able to do, which is much more focused in communication, self-directed learning, and interacting with clients, and really saying explicitly that they're not looking for graduates who just have consumed a whole bunch of rules that they don't know how to work with actively in practice. So the voice-based tools that I'm describing, I think, offer several benefits to these critiques that using this technology in our courses. First, these tools can offer efficient teaching techniques. So they do take time to get set up, but once they're set up, so for example, I've been using them for 2 years and I really haven't changed them much. I just copy and paste them into my new semesters, my new courses, but they're pretty efficient. Once they're up, you set up, a statute you want them to interpret or a client prompt you want them to analyze, and then they can carry over nicely. And if you tie them to an existing casebook, you might not even need to write the problem. You could say, respond to the question on this page in this voice thread. They're also quite so they're efficient to grade, they're efficient to post, and I think it's a more sustainable teaching technique. We can keep it going. It doesn't have the same burnout as like a simulation in class might or a written assignment might. But the thing that I think is most compelling for me is that they are inclusive. It ensures that the voices in our class are all empowered equally, and they all share the same space with respect to responding to client prompts or getting feedback. And oftentimes in group assignments tend to follow these same dominant personalities, with sort of a couple of students driving, other students more off to the sides. So it really promotes an inclusive generation of student voice. It's also squarely grounded in lawyering and in clients. So these are, for me, they're all client-based simulations and or lawyering-based simulations. So they're arguing a motion, they're advising a client on an answer to a question. And in so doing, they value communication skills in a way that's very different from a Socratic class. Oftentimes in a Socratic class, it's the loud voice, the dominant voice, the self-assured voice that we believe is the successful voice. But in law practice, we look for far more diverse types of voices, and most notably good listeners. So valuing communication skills in empathy, in tone, in cultural competence, and being able to interface with clients facing hardship. And in that sense, the simulations are a lot more modernized. It jumps out of a casebook. Even if the prompt itself comes from a casebook, the tech that they're working with can replicate law practice more. So let's look, so these are some of the products that I'm aware of. Flipgrid and VoiceThread are the two that I use. And I see in the chat someone noting, Kate noting that Canvas has some of this technology built in as well. That's great to know. So I'm describing broadly a suite of technology that would allow voice and video participation. And these are some examples. So 3 ways that I use these assignments particularly. The first is to engage in litigation assignments. So in torts, they'll argue a motion for summary judgment, or they'll argue something to the jury, or they'll argue in family law, a child custody motion. And the nice thing about a litigation-based simulation is you can divide students in teams, and then they can listen to their opponent and they can hear and reflect what the other arguments would have been. So we can teach them how to think in an adversarial way and how to think in a persuasive way. But they have to put themselves together and record it, but it gives them the space to do it. If this were done in class, it would more often be done in a goldfish bowl technique, where a couple students come in the front and they model it, and maybe their style connects with the students, or maybe it marginalizes and disempowers students. Second, I have students work collaboratively to advise a client. So I'll give them a meaty question, like an ethical question of whether a family law firm can represent 2 parties jointly. And then I put up the model rules that govern, and there are multiple steps, multiple factors, and they're in small groups of 3 to 4, and they can record whenever they want. So the first person will come in and record a little bit, and the second person will jump in and add to it. The third person will jump in, and the fourth will wrap it up. And the reason I like this, particularly with modern students who are often used to sort of a tech world that's abrupt and harsh and doesn't necessarily foster listening and collaboration, is they have to listen to each other to hear what's already been said. And it's also very motivating because students jump in to get in there, because if you go first, you just start anywhere. But if you go last, you got to close it up and make sure you listen to what everyone else says. So it promotes collaboration nicely. And then the final technique that I use is discussing a policy-based topic with a lot of depth and breadth. This reminds me of a presentation I saw a couple days ago describing web quests, like a scavenger hunt on the web. I would do something like that. I would say, let's talk about the critiques of child support's enforcement mechanisms and its carceral approaches. And we would take time to go research it, and they would come prepared, and they would offer a perspective of a single mother in a child support system, or an obligor in a child support enforcement, trapped in the enforcement mechanisms. And they would speak from that perspective and offer a critique and then a reform of the child support system. And so this allows students to engage with topics that particularly involve complex issues of race and class and gender. And it will allow them to collect their thoughts, collect their research, and prepare and then post. And then they can hear a range of topics. Whereas if this were in class, the burden of participation would sit heavily on a few students who would kind of carry the whole dialogue. So that's my presentation. I look forward to any questions. And if anyone's interested, I've used this in legal research, legal writing, torts, and family law. And I'd be thrilled to share more concrete, the PowerPoints, for example, that sit on VoiceThread and feed the assignments. But thank you all so much.
Fantastic, Jamie. Thank you. Lots to think about. Our second presentation is Jane Winn from University of Washington. Can LMS analytics help law schools demonstrate compliance with outcome-based assessment of student learning accreditation rules? Jane, the floor is yours.
Okay, so can I share?
Yes, you can.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so
And we see your screen, your slides.
great. Okay. Since we're speaking briefly today, I'm just going to say, remind everyone, what are the ABA accreditation rules about student learning outcomes? And people who already use Google Analytics would already know what you can use clickstream data analysis for, but I'm guessing not everybody is familiar with that. So I'm just going to mention that. Then I'm going to mention direct and indirect measures of learning outcomes. And finally, I'll talk about the research that is just beginning about how clickstream data from learning management systems might be used to get new insights into more complex issues. And the complex issue that I've chosen is, of course, demonstrating compliance with the ABA accreditation rules. So it's very early days. This is something that I've just barely begun, and I'm going to be working on it over the summer. So I'm not presenting conclusions, I'm presenting questions and a research agenda. Okay, so what are the ABA rules, accreditation rules about student learning outcomes? Okay, so the dean and faculty of a law school shall conduct, ongoing formative and summative assessment, et cetera. Now, the piece that I am most interested in is making appropriate changes to improve the curriculum in light of what the analysis of student learning outcomes shows. Okay, so that's what I'm focused on. Okay, so there's an assessment plan, and at an absolute minimum, when the ABA, accreditation committee shows up at a law school, they're going to want to see an assessment plan. They're going to want to see syllabi with learning outcomes. Now, sooner or later, they're going to ask, what changes have you made in your curriculum in light of the results of your analysis? I don't think they're asking that yet, but I think it's coming. So that I'm trying to anticipate the next level in accreditation scrutiny. So there's lots of things you can use. For example, when you create multiple choice questions, you can code the multiple choice questions so that, if the software evaluates the student performance, it generates scores. So clickstream data is completely different than that. And up to this point, there's been a fair amount of research by people in, education schools about, well, what can you use clickstream data for? And the answer is, well, it's not going to be as clear a predictor of a specific, mastery of a specific rule compared to, multiple choice questions or something, right? So clickstream data is you can set the browser to record the time of visit, pages visited, how long on each page, where they came from, the type of web browser, and the operating system. So you can see it's like, that's going to be difficult to map onto legal education learning outcomes. It doesn't jump out at you like what the possible correlation would be. Okay, so that was for the last speaker. I just saw it chat. Okay, so now, so what insights can you get? Well, there's reports you can generate with tools like Google Analytics or other tools, that will tell you, which resources on your website are the most popular, what interactions are occurring most frequently. When people come to look at a page, what percentage of those people are being quote unquote converted by giving an email or making a purchase. Okay, so the existing use of clickstream data is to improve interface design, to assign risks to different goals, like the probability that you'd be able, you know, if you made a specific investment, what are the odds that you'd get what you were aiming for? If you detect anomalies, it gives you some hypotheses of what might be causing the anomalies. You can compare historical trends. So in a commercial context, that's stuff all has immediate obvious applications. And like I said, I'm happy to concede that in learning, the applications are a lot less, you know, obvious. A direct measure of a learning outcome would be the results of a test or a quiz or a writing assignment. An indirect measure of a learning outcome would include things like student self-assessment, you know, student evaluations, whatever. So let's go ahead and concede that there is no question that learning analytics are an indirect measure of learning outcome at best. No question. Now, why would learning analytics be interesting compared to, say, you know, student self-assessment? And the answer is because it's objective. So it's just a different way of trying to learn about the student experience, and it's just based on behavior. Now, it's a little bit incomplete. If something is left hanging on a website for hours, you don't know if they went to the grocery store and came back. You just don't know what that means. So it gives you objective information, but not very deep. So what I'm interested in is the idea of trying to combine direct and indirect measures. So there is evidence that if you can, you know, triangulate, if you can incorporate assessment tools that are based on different kinds of data, that the cumulative result would be a lot more interesting than any of the individual methods used in isolation. So the idea of using clickstream data is to provide a deeper insight than just a quiz score. Okay, so if you haven't actually tried to access the learning analytics in a learning management system, this is a Canvas interface, and it's in the toolbar over on the right-hand side. And there's two versions. Canvas is currently offering two versions, and you can go into the settings page and choose. There's learning analytics and new learning analytics, and it's not obvious to me which one would be better or worse. So I'm still working. That's the kind of thing I'm going to work on over the summer, is trying to figure out whether new analytics or old analytics provides more useful tools for assessing learning outcomes in law. Okay, now I see there's another question in chat. Whoops, maybe not. I'm looking. No, not seeing. I'm not seeing what's in chat. Okay, so okay, now there is starting to be a peer review academic literature looking at the use of learning outcomes to evaluate, if we think of sort of the Bloom's taxonomy of learning outcomes, you can start to move up the taxonomy to more sophisticated learning outcomes. So one of these is published in 2019, one is published in 2020. So these are very recent. So for the last 20 years, there's been a steady trickle of academic articles saying that if there are online resources for a course and students don't engage with it, those students are at a much higher risk of failing the course or getting a bad grade. And so it's a triage tool to just identify students that are at risk and target them with offers of additional support. So that insight's been available for, 10 or 20 years. So it looks like people are starting to turn the corner. And so we have a study from the University of Texas, which is the 2019 study. And for those students, it was like a Psychology 101 course offered to the University of Texas students. It was 100% online. And so it's 100% online. There was no bricks and mortar classroom component. And they could correlate the analytics data with the students' SAT performance, because they were just, in their first year of college, and their final grades. And they got some moderately interesting outcomes. I mean, it's like, people who cram at the end of the quarter in the middle of the night are much more likely to get a bad grade. It's like, I think we knew that already. But anyway, so it's not deep insights yet. This other one is much, much, much more challenging. And This is research that's funded by the National Science Foundation. And I shared it with a colleague of mine who's a mathematician, and he said, this is really, really advanced math. So what they're doing is they're taking like all the learning analytics for an entire university, independent of the subject, and they're trying to detect patterns that correlate with outcomes. And what they've sort of defaulted to is time. So again, it's like students that jam studying into the end of the quarter or study in the middle of the night are more at risk of having lower learning outcomes. So it's like, well, that's like more than this student is at risk and you need to ask them if everything's okay. I mean, we're starting to get some results, but these still aren't very deep results. So the question is, how could this possibly be useful for law school accreditation? So this picture is a Shewhart statistical process control chart, which is used in a continuous improvement feedback loop in things like ISO 9000 or total quality management or agile or whatever. So it's one of the foundational technologies of creating a continuous improvement feedback loop. So that's what I'm interested in. That's what's revolutionized logistics. You know, Netflix, how was Netflix able to triumph over its competition? Not just manufacturing, but service industries. So this is a very, very powerful tool for improving quality, which is the ultimate ABA accreditation question is demonstrate that you have made improvements in your curriculum in light of your data analysis. That's what people in business have been doing with statistical process control for 50, 70 years now. So that's what I'm aiming for. I'm going to work on that over the summer. I've hired a PhD student in the statistics department at UW to help me. The question is, how could we close the loop and use clickstream data from learning management systems like Canvas to make appropriate changes to improve the curriculum? Okay, so we know that there's a time factor, you know, procrastination, studying in the middle of the night, right? Now, that's about all students without regard to subject, right? Now, if we analyze the time factor and we discover that all students are piling up their, so say hypothetically, we discover all students are procrastinators. It's like, oh, well, now procrastination is not predicting the difference between success and failure. So what would we do in a situation like that? Well, we could guess that the course has too much content or the curriculum has too much content. They're spending too much time on their other courses, okay? So now looking at the data, the NSF funded research and the UT research say that studying intensively right at the end of the quarter is associated with the worst performance, but we have 100% of students doing that, so it's not explaining performance. So we're using the data to generate hypotheses, and then the gold standard in empirical research is a randomized control test. And we can't do different sections of the JD 1L class because there's ethical problems and confounding variables. What if we recruited undergraduates who said they might be considering going to law school? And we gave them the option to be randomly assigned to different sections of a law school readiness program. And then, you know, looked at, you know, adjusted different things to see if we could identify what's causing the studying intensively at the end problem and how to fix it. So that's just a very general suggestion about what it might look like to generate a hypothesis and then test it. And in addition to the learning management data and the score data, you could also, if students knew they were participating in a pilot, you could also interview them, you know, and find out what was happening in their lives and how they felt about the course. So then you're really triangulating because you've got the score data, you've got the analytics, you've got the qualitative stuff from the interview, you've got the subject matter expert perspective on how the content was organized and delivered. So that's where I'm trying to get to. How long will it take? I haven't got a clue. I mean, if I could get to something like this by the end of the summer, I'd be thrilled. Maybe it will take 5 years. I literally have no idea how long it's going to take. So that's my presentation. Any questions?
Thank you very much, Jane. We're gonna hold questions to the end for all three folks. And let's go to the last presenters. Where am I? Active learning using VR to train law students with an introduction by Alexander the Cat. And Nowak is our speaker. Alexander is also our speaker. And Warren Black, I believe, is also on the video. So we have a video to show, and then we're going to come back to Ann and Warren and questions. So go ahead, Tobias.
Hey everyone, it's me, Alexander. Remember me? I'm Ann Nowak's cat, and I gave a presentation here last year about what to do and not do on Zoom. Well, now I'm back. The call for proposals this year said if you had a magic lamp, what would you wish for in the way legal education is done in the 2020s? Well, as you can see, I have a magic lamp. My wish is that Mom would put lots of comfort food in it every day before she abandons me to go to the law school to teach. Oh, okay. Mom is telling me there's no way she's going to put food in this lamp and that I have to come up with a wish that contains actual wisdom. Like what? I'm some sort of wizard or something? I'm just a friggin' house cat, but okay. So, I'm going to restrict my comments to stuff about computer-mediated instruction and educational videos because that's what this conference is about. By the way, see the mouse next to my lamp? He's my friend. He's like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz because he doesn't have a brain. That means he can't go to law school. But I like him anyway. Okay, here's my wish. I wish that all law students could have virtual reality headsets, so when the students are at home, they could put on their headsets and see themselves in courtrooms in 3 dimensions. That way, they could practice trial skills as though they were really in court. They could feel like they're in a courtroom when they're really at home in their pajamas. Would that be cool or what? The only downside is that the technology isn't advanced enough to contain smell-o-vision. Then again, not having smell-o-vision is probably for the best because you won't be able to smell when someone farts in your virtual courtroom. Okay, so my mom has a friend who knows all about using virtual reality technology in education, and he's going to explain to you how law schools can use it in the 2020s. His name is Warren Black. Here's Warren.
Well, thank you, Alexander. Hi, everyone. I'm not only Alexander's mom and the voice of Alexander, but I'm also Ann Nowak, the professor at Touro Law Center. And I'm very, very pleased to introduce you today to an old friend of mine, Warren Black. Warren is a pioneer in using virtual reality in education in primary and secondary schools, but he is here today to tell you how you can use virtual reality in legal education. Take it away, Warren.
Hi, Ann, how are you? And hi, everybody out there. And I appreciate you taking the time to sit down and learn about what we're capable of doing using virtual reality technology in educational settings. Traditionally, I've been selling game design, not just viewing games that kids have that are educational, but actually having students create and build their own games, which gives them a far higher understanding of the subject areas that they're working in. And they actually have about over 90% retention when building their own game versus just rote memory by reading a book or going into a VR environment and looking at something, because they have to do the research and then create the game, and they have ownership of that game and can play it and take it home. Well, the same applies for a law school setting in a mock courtroom, for example. Why would we use VR in a mock courtroom? The reasons are obviously, the first one is what has happened in the past year, over a year with COVID, and how it necessitates us being online through distance learning. Secondly, the efficiency and the cost. We don't have to drive to a school to attend a mock courtroom. We can actually put on a head-mounted virtual reality display and be in that courtroom with the teacher, with the professor, or with other students if necessary, and actually go into the environment, interact in it as if it's a real courtroom. So the cost and the efficiency of it is dramatic in terms of what we're offering. Now, how would this work in a scenario in law school? Well, the best part is you create the game, and a lot of students in law school now, fortunately, we have every age group, but a lot of gamers who've had have seen video games before. They've been in our culture for so many years. But we have a software called VR Quest, which enables you to build that scenario. So you as a student, if given the assignment to do a cross-examination, would actually go in, create a character, be that character in the game, and then record your own voice, and the character would lip sync it. So you actually become a part of the actual law school training mock courtroom experience. And that's the best part. And then if, for example, there was assessment that could be included, or if Professor Ann said that we needed to change this, that this was incorrect, or make comments or constructive criticism, you could go back and redo it until you had it to the point where you had understood the necessary components of cross-examining, let's say, a potential witness. But with all that said, I'm going to share my screen, and we are going to take a look at a courtroom scene very quickly. And I've opened the VR Quest software. I'm going to show you two fun pieces here. First, let's look at that scene. And I'm going to actually move around a little. You'll see a woman talking about selecting, I believe, juries or witnesses. And you'll hear her talk and discuss what's the best way to do it. So here's that example. And this, by the way, only took a couple of hours to produce, and it's a template. You'll see.
If you're wondering, how do I know if my witness needs witness effectiveness training? My question would be, how do you know your witness does not need witness effectiveness training? And honestly, unless that witness has testified already in this case to this jury in his or her role in this particular case, and you've received juror feedback that is positive and complimentary and nothing but constructive, then your witness needs witness effectiveness training. Every case is different. Each witness approaches each case in a different way, and even experts who've given 1,000 depositions approach each case a little bit differently. Each case has its own facts, its own nuances. Each case brings with it a set of attorneys that may be different than the last case, for example, and witnesses really need case-specific witness training on every case.
Okay, great. As you can see, with VR Quest, let me open up my screen again here. There we go. I'm going to show you now how we quickly create something, because most people, and for many, many years, it was very difficult to create even a simple scene such as that. So what I'm going to do is open a blank template here. And this is an exterior. Of course, we can build interiors. I'm going to bring in entities. We have presently 4,000 models. And if you're a law school and you want to have different specific models that are customized, you can build them yourself, or we can build them and bring them in. So let's look at a Middle Eastern building. I can put it in, I can rotate it, I can scale it if I like, just by going here. So aside from the actual content that you're putting in, it's a fun program to work with. That's why we have it in schools from 4th grade to 12th grade in the English, science, math, and social studies, and kids love it. They want to build their own games. So the same would apply in the law school. We could bring in the software, we could show it to kids, show it to students, and then it's easy to learn. Within 10 minutes, students in schools are building. So I just put in a building. I'm going to test this level. Of course, I could add trees. I could build my own courtroom. You see the graphics are beautiful. We can move around in that environment just as I did in the courtroom. And it took me about 20 seconds. I can add trees. I can bring in water scenes. I mean, it's all applicable into any type of education. So it's a great thing for now building something. Let's just show you how I can quickly do that. So we have a pre-built building, but if you were going to create that courtroom and you needed the floor, we could put that floor in. And you see, I'm just dragging and dropping. And of course, if we needed walls of that courtroom, I will put those in. And we'll put a door here. And then I could add a roof, obviously, bring in the furniture and do all that's necessary, but it would only take me a few minutes. So let me close the software and get back on screen and stop sharing and close this out, because I just want you to see the potential. And one of the great things is now that teachers such as Ann, professors and students, and have now experienced a new learning construct. The great part is that we're open. Our ideas are open. Doors are now open for us to step through, to look at these specific constructs, see how they benefit our education experience. And wonderfully, Ann Nowak has seen that, and that's why she brought me here today. And I wanted you to experience it. And I wanted you to see the potential. There's nothing better than now just not only looking at this like you did on a computer screen, but imagine putting on that virtual reality headset that we all see on television and going into that scene. It's extremely realistic. And remember, you've created the scene. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes talking about it. That's it. And I'm going to turn it over to Ann. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Warren. I've actually, as you know, Warren, experienced this through virtual reality goggles.
Yes, I
so
do.
I feel like I'm actually there. But Alexander wants to say something to you also.
Oh, that's nice.
So hold on for a second. He will be right here.
Wow, that was cool, Warren. Thanks. I've got my VR headset on, and I'm here at home ready to practice my courtroom skills. Imagine the possibilities. I could be a defense counsel for cats who were charged with crimes like pooping on their humans' pillows. And I could get paid in cat treats. I love virtual reality.
Thank you, Alexander.
Thank you,
I wouldn't want to
Alexander.
have him be my prosecuting attorney. I'd be pretty scared.
Yeah, he's really ferocious.
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Warren. I really appreciate that you joined us and told everybody about what's possible in the world of virtual reality for legal education. So,
I'm happy to do so. Thank you very much.
thanks.
Bye-bye.
That's the video. Very good. Thank you so much. All right. Let's get the questions for any and all of the presenters. Put your questions in the Q&A and chat. I'll start. I'll start by warming things up. Jamie, the first thing that popped in my head with student created videos is grading, or how do you grade? Do you have a rubric? Do you, well, I'll just ask that.
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things. Some of the ones that are more sort of thought engagement, I typically just grade for completion. So where they're reflecting on a policy, it's worth a couple points. And then the nice thing about VoiceThread particularly is it gives a list of who was supposed to complete the assignment and who did or didn't. So I usually just grade that in a binary of completed or not completed. For the bigger ones, like if I'm going to have them argue a child custody motion, I do grade those, but I'm usually exceedingly generous and am grading, just thoughtful effort. And then I'll usually do, one nice thing is that you can grade like while walking your dog or doing laundry, you can just, put the the thread in your earbuds and just listen to the whole thing. And so usually I'll give a global memo that says students who received a 5 out of 5 were particularly strong, because they achieved these things. Students who received a 4, didn't tether to the elements as strongly as those who received a 5. Students who received a 3 were, impartial. But I'll try to stay at more of that macro level. And then oftentimes I'll just record that as a video as well. So I'm engaging with them in the same format. And then usually what I'll also do is direct them to a few strong examples. This was a particularly great motion, and look at this compared to this, the adversary's motion. And then I can see using, thank you, Jane, using the data, the clickstream data, I can see how many people then go and read it after I suggested that they do that. So you can see who's engaging and the time they're spending online.
That was my follow-up question was, do you create model videos so they can look after, they can see afterwards, here's a good, better, best versions of what I should have done?
I don't, but in the voice thread where I have them work collaboratively, that's the hardest part, where I'm like, here's a client and 4 of you are going to advise this client together. Usually after the very first time I do it, the next time we're in class, I'll play the thread for the class and I'll say, like, and what do you guys like about this? Why is this so strong? This was, the really effective voice thread. What did they do well? So I'll play it for them so they can I self-identify what makes it really strong. And I saw in the Q&A a question about disability and how to navigate that. So I'll just very quickly note in the voice thread program, you can, students can choose to participate with a video, a voice, or text. And so I have had students who have had speech-based disabilities who have opted for the text. It's very clunky, it's not great. But then the prompt itself is usually PowerPoint slides. So those would be compatible with with accommodations as long as the slides are prepared properly and thoughtfully. And then I have a little disclaimer in my syllabus that if anyone encounters a tech issue, they can always just do it by email and send it by email. So I have had some students who just the tech is too frustrating and they always participate by email, which is tedious and frustrating. But earlier on, before COVID, I was far more understanding of those hardships. Now people are getting better.
Very good, very good. What about peer grading? Students looking at each other's videos. I thought I saw that in one of the systems that was possible, or
yeah,
supported.
I don't do peer grading, but I do peer responses. So if they go watch their adversaries and then they'll say something in response, what was a really great argument that your opponent made? What was the strength of your opponent's argument? So I'll have them engage with it, but not grade it directly.
Very good. Jane Winn, I had 2 questions for you. Maybe I'll start with what I hope is the easier one. What's the best you hope? What's the best outcome of your research? What would be like? Oh my gosh, that's awesome! I can do something with this.
I would be able to match up particular interfaces to present to students to associate with specific learning outcomes, because the idea is ultimately to get like some kind of a branching structure where if I can map, you've got a quiz and you can test for certain, the problem is like most quizzes test for relatively low level learning outcomes on Bloom's taxonomy. So the goal is to move up Bloom's taxonomy and to be able to diagnose with more granularity where students are tripping up, and then invite them to go into a separate loop and get a sense of how well they're mastering it. So the idea is I want feedback. I want to get it set up so that I'm getting feedback on my design of online instructional materials.
That's great. We've with Cali lessons, they branch. Some of them do, but I'm the first to admit they're not very sophisticated, and it's both very hard to model what you want for a student conversational tree, all the expert system people basically said, forget rules, go to an AI system, an NLP system, a natural language processing thing that might be able to respond or something like that. There's some sophisticated stuff there, but the problem is I don't see being able to build it easily in the micro. You know what I mean? Teaching a particular subject, building a big enough, responsive enough system, even in a narrow thing like contracts, much less a particular topic within contracts or something like that.
Right, but I wasn't going to use AI. I was going to use something like Amazon's MTurk. So as I have like small pieces of a online course, I'm going to do A/B testing with MTurk. I'm going to get, tech workers around the world who don't have law degrees to just try out, different interfaces and see which, just see because at this point it's so early. This is like not even a pilot. So the idea is I'm going to start putting stuff up on MTurk and letting, get like 50 people to try it one way, 50 people to try it another way, and just see what we can detect until there's patterns that start to emerge.
And then iterate on those interfaces until, as the good ones win and the bad ones win and lose with air quotes.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, now I'll ask you the hard question. Law schools will do the minimum to get by on the ABA rules. I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, okay, so what does the mother bird do? The mother bird finds the earthworms and chews them up and barfs up the chewed up earthworms into the mouth of the baby bird. So if I have to work on this for 5 years and I come up with 2 or 3 out of the ballpark winning strategies, I think the number of people in legal education that will ever care how I got there is tiny. But if I can actually get tools that show that are easy to use, that have a concrete immediate payoff for the faculty, that have a demonstrable benefit for the students, say 5 years, then I agree 100%. Maybe, I don't know, like the people on this call could volunteer and say, if there used to be 10,000 people, employed in instructional capacities in American legal education, something like that, right? When you count all the lecturers and everything, right? Out of that population of, say, just estimate 10,000, what proportion of people do you think would join, a collaborative network with me to work on analyzing learning analytics and what insights they provide with regard to different ways of displaying content to students? I would guess maybe a dozen. If I look really long and hard, maybe I can find a dozen people that would be interested in collaborating with me. But it's like everybody else is just waiting for the outcome.
A coalition of the willing. That's 0.1%, though. Maybe we can find more than that. All right, there were some questions on the VR. It looks like somebody answered them already. So you already answered them online. I had a question. I mean, you basically showed. I mean, getting lots of people to buy VR helmets is going to be a while until they're built into our phones. And you basically just showed it on a computer screen. Why don't we do it? Don't you road test VR simulations or road test simulations on existing technologies like phones and computers before you have to go to specialized equipment?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of the main things of VR Quest is, and nobody does this, everybody else builds for the headset. We don't, and specific for learning situations, we have the students in schools, whether it be in law school or in regular day school in high school, for example, build their game on their computer without a headset. They can save that as an executable file and play it, and usually through our cloud if they like with other students. They can also, send it out on any Facebook, or you don't even need to buy the software to run that executable file. So the students build their game. The VR headset then will, you can then take that game and upload it on an Oculus Quest 2 headset, and it will go directly to the headset. You can put on the VR, and now you're in VR. So your courtroom can be on the computer. You're building and designing it there, then you upload the final, what you're creating onto the head-mounted display. Head-mounted displays are relatively inexpensive now. The Oculus Quest 2 is $299 for the 64 gigabyte. So, you know, and schools are purchasing them, you know, by the dozens right now. And now with the stimulus money, we're seeing a huge uptick in the purchase of the hardware. The problem is, as you mentioned, is why do you need that technology? You don't. You know, we can build that whole scene on the software and VR Quest software and not even have a headset. And that's the cool part about it. I did it specifically for equity and inclusiveness, because a lot of kids at home, for example, they may go to school and have the headsets available there. But what if you're home and you don't have the money for a headset? You know, we wanted to be inclusive to have kids be able to experience the games and build them and create them, and then not have to buy a headset. And that was one of the main reasons that when we created the software, we did it in such a manner.
Yeah, years ago, Cali was involved in something called the Interactive Video Disc Project,
Yeah.
in which there was a television plugged into literally an IBM PC, and a court case played on the television, and then the PC would pop up with, you would hit the space bar and object, then the video would be the judge, what's the basis of the objection, then the PC would be a multiple choice question on which argument you wanted to make. And nowadays, building something like that is, you know, the tooling is a lot easier, but the scripting of that is a real skill.
Well,
that is very difficult.
Well, it's actually not, and I'll tell you why. There are, I don't want to get too technical here, but generally there are two game engines. One's called Unreal and one's called Unity that are available on the internet. But the learning curve, you need a year of study. Well, what we did at my company is we built our own game engine. And we did that specifically to outfox and outsmart. So now you don't have to learn Unity. You can just take VR Quest and the coding is built into it. So if you want to have text or script, or you just click on a button that says text box and you can type in your text, you can type in your questions, you can ask questions, you can get answers, you can do a full assessment. That's why VR Quest is very unique, is you don't need to take hours and hours of study to build that environment. I mean, I literally can build a courtroom in an hour, and those characters, guess what? We don't have to, how do we add voice? We click record. As a student, I would say, okay, I'm going to cross-examine a witness. Here it goes. Once that recording is made, it automatically lip syncs to the character. You don't have to worry about coding. So there's no learning curve involved. And that's the best part. That took us about 5 years to build the game engine. So we did it specifically because we wanted educational institutions not to have to go through the learning. And you know what? Most important is the teachers. If teachers get frustrated by having to learn programs, then they're not going to adopt them. And the great thing about VR Quest is the teachers really don't have to learn the software. Let the students build, let them create, and the teachers would just put out their curriculum, their questions, whether they be multiple choice or their outcomes that they want, and the students are responsible for entering them into the game.
I'm surprised you didn't say no code. No
code. And by the way, you can use code. We give that opportunity for the high school students that if they want to learn coding, they can actually, they're called Lewis scripts, but they're simple. They can write their own script. They can give a character behavior. But when we want a character to wave their arms, we just click on wave character's arms. That's it. And it does it automatically. It does it automatically, right? So that's the beauty of it, is how simple it is. And specific for law school, as I said in the video, you know, if you now with COVID and all of that, who knows what's going to happen in the future, but you know, the cost, I mean, if you can eliminate having a physical building to have a mock courtroom or a mock trial and do it in VR, you're saving a lot of money. And the students themselves are building these environments. So we can give them a template of a courtroom, and then they would add the characters, they'd add the questions, they'd add the answers, and all the, you know, the learning, you know, outcomes that you want.
So how hard would it be to pull, because you can get transcripts of courts, obviously people do that, and sort of like feed that in other words, a simulation driven by an actual transcript from an actual court situation.
Quite simple. Give me the transcript, just like I would be reading a script in Hollywood for a part, and I would hit the record button, and my character, I would read it, and then the character would immediately, you hit end recording, character immediately lip syncs it, and it's recording, and it's part of the character now.
Why not text to speech?
What?
Text to speech, like
We
Amazon
have text to
Polly.
speech as well. The software has text to speech, and you can pick your voice. And you can change the tone, the timbre, you know, the speed of the voice. So we have text to speech. We have voice to speech as well.
Excellent, excellent.
I
All right,
thought
that's
of
all.
all of it.
All right.
Well, think about it. If you want kids to learn, especially kids that are coming from other countries to learn English, what better way than to have them write textually the what a sentence or a paragraph, and then hear that in English. So you know, that's great for students learning foreign, who are from foreign countries, learning English. ELA.
Very good. Thank you. Thank all of you for your presentations. That was fascinating. That was our last cluster of sessions. We're now going to go into an hour break. And then we've got the closing plenary, sorry, the closing keynote and the raffle. So thanks, folks, and
Sure. Thank you very much.
see you in a bit.
All right. Bye.